Hail and well met. I'm your humble dungeon master, Melkor the Mage, and today I'm going to give you some dungeon mastering tips to make your dungeon crawls mean something. Alright, so first step that you want to do is to take into account what type of what your party character's party composition is. Is it melee heavy? Is it caster heavy? Is it range heavy, like ranged physical damage heavy? Or is it a mixed, or is it a fine mishmash? Do they have it? Also, another thing to note: do they have a healer? Do they have a cleric, druid, or bard? If the answer is then you might. Then do they have potions? If the answer is no to that, they're probably gonna die or have a lot of difficulty with it if they aren't intelligent. Sorry about that. Okay. So one thing to look at when you're doing dungeons in Dungeons and Dragons, because obviously there's going to be dungeons at some point, you don't want to make the dungeon easy. At the same time, if they're newer players, you don't want to make it too brutal. I usually say fuck making it easy. I make it very difficult because it's a dungeon that's got multiple levels. Especially if it's a labyrinth, and you have multiple levels in a labyrinth. Oh my god, is it beautiful? Like, oh my god. But I approach dungeons very much like you would in AD&D or in World of Warcraft. For those of you who are more familiar with World of Warcraft dungeon runs, back in Cataclysm especially had a lot of good mechanics, and the dungeons at least, and heroic dungeons were actually worth something. But I digress. The reason I approach dungeon runs so differently than other DMs I've come across usually is because I have a very strict adherence to rolls. So if you're a wizard and you're not Batmaning and you're going damage, in my opinion, you're playing it wrong. You need to be Batmaning as a wizard. It's like you have the widest spell selection. You have dice in there. You dice in some utility spells, out of combat spells, hard damage spells if you need it. So let's say you're going into the mountains. Your cold themed spells aren't going to be as worth much. You might want to go fire, or vice versa. If you're going into a volcano, your fire themed spells might be worthless, and you might want to go cold or lightning. Regardless of the fact, you also want to, your party also needs to, you also got to take into account your party's equipment on top of their classes. So if you have your melee and they got maybe only one of them has a magic weapon, let's say your rogue took a dip into warlock for 3 levels to get Pact of the Blade, so they had a magic weapon. Okay. That means they can bypass a lot of resistance. Let's say your monk is way of the open hand. They don't need to worry about magic weapons because their fists are already magical. Let's say your barbarian is the main tank, and he has a +1 great axe, and he's a half orc. Okay, well he does so he's gonna be doing the more he's got a weapon that can help him bypass that damage. Your wizards don't really need magical items at all, really, unless it's robes or rings, more jewelry shit. And a lot of people, the reason why most people play martial classes, fun fact, in 5th edition is actually in D&D, and in this case 5th edition, is because magic items. People want the magic items. They'll go martial because they can actually justify using magic items, in this case weapons and armor, because your casters, you don't need it. You really don't. You're let's look at me as a wizard. Oh, that's a nice +1 leather armor that I'll never be able to use. Rogue, you need this. Or that's a nice +1 greatsword. Don't need it. +1 quarterstaff. Don't need it. I've got cantrips. I don't need this. Do you have a monk at all? No? Okay, give it to the warlock. It's basically like that as a wizard and sorcerer in D&D. You don't need weapons. You really don't. You don't use them. It's a lot different from the older days of Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, where wizards actually had to use crossbows, as I explained in my welcome to my wizard video a while back. The main reason dungeons are a lot different, a lot of people hate dungeon crawls, It's because a lot of people don't like dealing with entirely combat, but I find it to be completely ludicrous. You can have a dungeon crawl and actually have a lot of RP in it if you have the right group of players and have the right look at it. A dungeon crawl is a wonderful thing, and a lot of DMs really underutilize it, and they really should use them occasionally. Don't use them all the time. Don't be like running into nothing but dungeon crawls. By all means, no. But occasionally, having a dungeon crawl can make a wonderful, wonderful story. It can make a wonderful thing, and something people tell stories about. Because honestly, in my opinion at least, the most fun a lot of people have in Dungeons and Dragons is rolling your dice. Okay. And it gets to a fun point. It also comes to the fact that a lot of players, at least if they're playing casually, they tend to roll for their stats. One thing I usually do use standard array, but I also don't like arrays personally. I'll explain why I dislike arrays. It makes it to where every single fighter is the same as every other fighter, and every wizard's the same as every other wizard, and vice versa. Um, what I do is I roll 3d6 in order for most of my characters. Occasionally I'll roll 4 dice. Occasionally I'll roll 4d6, drop the lowest, and reroll ones. I personally like 3d6 in order because it makes some interesting characters. In fact, I usually like playing characters that are useless in one or more things because it gives me something fun to do. But if you're in a game of D&D, rolling 4d6, drop the lowest is generally the preferred method for whatever reason. For the most part, it leads to a slightly higher average than rolling with 3d6, drop 3d6 in order. I don't usually advise players to roll in order. I do, but that's just how I started playing D&D, was rolling in order. So we're gonna look at a stat roll. I know this kind of got a little off topic from the dungeon, but definitely if you do have dungeon crawls, definitely have a boss fight. In fact, if you can, have several, and have them have mechanics and things that the players need to think about. Like if you're fighting a fighter, have him bring in have a couple minions, like a couple like other fighters with him that will attempt to grapple your main frontliners and keep them just like down, and the other guy and the main boss can just come in and wreak havoc on your squishy mages, your healers. So that's a good thing to have it. Um, have a lot of fights. Like if you're, let's say you got a dragon as a boss. Okay, dragon in a dungeon, go figure. But that dragon would have minions. That dragon would have kobold minions, winged kobolds, occasionally dropping rocks on the party. Nothing incredibly difficult to deal with, but just annoying enough to where it creates a diversion so your boss lasts longer. Don't skimp out on your dungeon. I can't say it enough. Do not skimp out on your dungeon. Your players will love you for giving them a challenging encounter. At least most of them will. Some of them want, a fun ride and want to do nothing but role playing, and that's great. Sometimes, sometimes shit's gotta die. And when shit's gotta die, that's the main way, generally, to get experience points, considering there's really no official ruling on experience for role-playing. It's usually a Dungeon Master only thing, and I usually don't need to worry about it anyway, because my players are good enough role players as it is. I don't need to encourage them any further. They really love the role-playing and the narrative part. So because of that, I give the experience for combat. If you kill the monster, if you kill the kobold, you get like 50 experience. I think it's like the same CR as a goblin, I think. I know zombies are like 25 experience points. I don't know. CR is weird. Let's just put it that way. CR is incredibly flexible, but I never really balance things for CR. I balance things depending on what they would fight for the story, which can be either really easy encounters or insanely difficult ones. So if you pissed off the Archmage, you might be dealing with some of his apprentices, which are powerful wizards in their own right. Or if you pissed off the King, you might be dealing with knights. And no one likes dealing with knights, especially at lower levels. But knights have way higher level than you, and they're like just immensely more badass than you are. Like a fifth level fighter just destroying a group of level 1s. Like For realsies, man. It's bad, man. It's fucking terrible. I think the best thing I can tell newer dungeon masters when it comes to dungeon crawls, don't be afraid to throw combat in your games. If you're not familiar with the rules of combat, that's fine, but to be fair, it is important to know them. Which, to be fair, most people can learn while they're doing the combat. But the main thing you want to understand what works is the conditions. So everything from blinded to the exhaustion condition, because exhaustion is a thing, and it does happen, and it's very dangerous. If you can plan your stuff out wisely as a character, you can maybe take comfortably 3 if you're a melee, and maybe 2, sometimes 3, depending on your constitution as a caster. Usually I don't go more. Usually I don't try to take more than 2 stacks of exhaustion as a caster because that does hamper your movement. Again, 6 stacks is death for exhaustion. So if you have 6 levels of exhaustion, you're dead. 5 stacks of exhaustion, your speed is 0. Cannot move. Your speed is 0. Blinded is a rare status effect. Same with deafened. A blinded creature can't see and automatically fails any ability check that requires sight. So perception checks that rely on sight, you fail. Any attack rolls against the creature have advantage, and the creature's attack rolls have disadvantage until the blind end, until he's no longer blinded. Deafened creatures, a deafened creature can't hear and automatically fails any ability check that requires hearing, or passive perception that requires hearing also fails. Another one that you got to keep in mind is the petrified condition. Most people never see this condition, but it's a very deadly one, and I'll tell you why. A petrified creature is transformed, along with any non-magical object it is wearing or carrying, into a solid inanimate substance, usually stone. Its weight increases by a factor of 10, yada yada yada, and ceases aging. The creature is incapacitated, and again, you gotta know the incapacitated condition, which basically you can't take actions or reactions, which is one reason why certain monsters that do have incapacitate are very deadly. And that's basically what the sleep spell does, is it incapacitates a person, as well as making them unconscious. Terribly sorry about that. Any attack rolls against the creature have advantage, go figure, because it's paralyzed. The creature automatically fails strength and dexterity saving throws. Very good if you got a wizard that loves throwing fireballs. The creature has a resistance to all damage. It's stone. And the creature is immune to poison and disease. Although a poison or disease that already in its system is suspended, not neutralized. So let's say you got afflicted with, I think, the rogue poison that requires 7 successful Constitution saves to end. That would just be suspended, not neutralized. However, prone's a condition that's very, very common. So basically, a prone creature's only movement option is to crawl, unless it stands up and thereby ends a condition. The creature has a disadvantage on all attack rolls, and any attack roll against the creature has advantage if the attacker is within 5 feet of the creature. However, the attack roll has otherwise the attack roll has disadvantage if it's ranged. So wizards cannot take advantage on things that are prone. Only melee can, unfortunately, unless you're using touch spells. And you're very rarely going to be using touch spells since there's very, very, very few of them. Only things like Cure Wounds, Bestow Curse, and Stalking Grasp, as far as I'm aware, are touch. Paralyzed is probably one of the most common ones that you'll ever see happen because of spells like Hold Person and Hold Monster. So basically, a paralyzed creature is incapacitated, you can see the condition, and cannot move or speak. The creature automatically fails strength and dexterity saving throws, and any attack rolls against the creature have advantage. If any attack that hits the creature is a critical hit if the attacker is within 5 feet of the creature. So rogues and fighters, basically melee, really cash in on this because they get crits. And this is one reason your wizard, mainly like Hold Person is probably the most used spell by a warlock. because of that, because you're making your melee crit. Especially if you're a Blade Lock, you don't worry about Eldritch Blast as much. You're worrying about hold person. Charmed is especially common if you're in a Feywild campaign. Charmed can be really nasty. It was actually a lot nastier back in 2nd edition, especially if you're looking at the Apocalypse Stone and Harpies. There's no cure for Harpies. A charmed creature can't attack the charmer or target the charmer with harmful abilities or magical effects, and the charmer has advantage on any ability checks made to interact socially with the creature. Enchantment wizards are very strange in that regard because most of their toolkit revolves around charms. And the problem with charms, especially spells like Charm Person or Friends, I call them the punch you in the face spell, is once that spell ends, they are immediately hostile towards you. Aside from all that, and this video's gone on for like almost 17 minutes, again, best tip for Dungeon Masters, just start off with a small dungeon. If you have any dungeon, just start off with a small dungeon, and work your way up from there gradually. You don't have to throw them into a mega dungeon immediately. And another thing, please, for the love of God, include traps and secret rooms. Don't skimp out on your secret rooms because you can find so much shit in there. There's so much gold, money, just all sorts of stuff inside those secret rooms that if you neglect them, you're really losing out a lot on a lot of potential shit and potentially even story hooks if you find something really crazy in one of those secret rooms, which can happen if your DM improvises it or makes it seem like he had it planned when really just pulled everything out of his, which everything just came inevitably out of his ass. Again, best thing I can say when it comes to D&D, just have fun. And it's been Dungeon Master Melkor. Stay nerdy, guys.